Do you think the ban on Kura Yangu Sauti Yangu and We the People is politically motivated? Do you think the ban on Kura Yangu Sauti Yangu and We the People is politically motivated? Let me just start by reading some of the comments before I introduce to you the panel that we have this morning, and I'll pose the same question to them. And we have Korir, who says it's not politically motivated. If they are not following the procedure for running, it should be struck off. We also have Abdallah, who says a war against civil society is a war against the citizens of Kenya. NGOs and CSOs, the boards in question, should be investigated. We also have concerned Kenyan, is what you've called yourself, and he says, of course, I guess agreeing that, of course, it is politically motivated. What's your thought? Do let us know. The hashtag that we're running that on is Morning Express KTN. If you'd like to tweet, it's at KTN News, or you can also tweet me directly, and that's at Michael G. Gitonga. Now, let's get into the discussion, and this morning, it's the political point. Joining me in studio, we have Steve Ogolla, who is an advocate of the High Court. Now, this morning, we're just hours after the IEBC declared, oh no, okay, that's not the correct intro, but there you go. Steve Ogolla, who's here with me in studio, who's an advocate of the High Court. We also have Murigi Kamande, who's joining us from our INM studios, and he is a constitutional lawyer. Let me start with you, Mr. Kamande. And the question that we have posed out to the public is whether you feel, or does it look like the crackdown on some of these NGOs, namely Kura Yangu Sauti Yangu and We the People, is politically motivated? Your thoughts and possibly your opening remarks, Kamande.
Good morning. My thinking is this. If you look at the timing of the crackdown and the summons that were issued to both Kura Yangu, Sauti Yangu, and also We the People, and also you look at the activities that they have been undertaking, essentially is what they've been political players. So you cannot rule out essentially that their crackdown is related to politics.
Okay, and from a legal perspective, one might argue, Commander, that if they're operating without some of those alleged registration documents, then they are indeed operating illegally. Or there's also an article that claims that they have received funds illegally or opened illegal accounts. Wouldn't that be a good enough account for the government to crack down?
Now, it is true. If you look at both organizations, they are two amorphous bodies themselves, which I'm very sure are not registered. For example, if you look at the We the People and a statement that they did issue a while ago, you will see that the signatories of that statement included officials from WASU, KMPDU. You also had officials from Kura Yangu Sauti Yangu. So I would not rule out the fact that they are not registered, and therefore it would be properly within the NGO Coordination Board mandate to ensure that they crack the whip, to ensure that they comply with the law, even if indeed that they've been operating without any registration. But I don't have any doubt in my mind that the way these NGOs have been operating, you realize that you have the same faces but transforming in names and tags. So depending on the occasion, you will see them changing names to suit the occasion. But what you do realize is, for example, today, the issue that arose was about one of the NGOs that is Muhuri. And I believe, strongly believe that Muhuri is registered. The only thing you cannot vouch for is whether they have been making returns or whether they've been operating legally. But when it comes to these other two, Kura Yangu, Sauti Yangu, We the People, I highly doubt whether they are registered. And indeed, if they've been operating bank accounts, then that would be illegal.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kamande. I'll just put you on hold a little bit while I engage Steve Ogolla, who's here in studio. And Steve, of course, timing here is what comes into question. But at the end of the day, you have what is legal, what is illegal. If they have been operating without some of these documents, is it time for the government to crack down? Or because of the political atmosphere, might it be prudent for the government to possibly wait for things to calm down?
Well, Fazul does not clearly doesn't understand the technique of governance and the arrangement under the Constitution, the strength and Bill of Rights. But if, just to be certain, Fazul is required to operate independently. So I would not want to extrapolate this to the executive, although until that is also established, I think sometimes it's unfair to relate the functions of that office. He doesn't necessarily take instructions from the executive of the presidency. So I would like to limit myself to his actions and the actions of his office, which I think...
Assuming that he's working independently and no influence.
There's no need to assume he works independently. That's what the law says.
Okay.
Now, this is a lobby. We the people and Kurayangu, Sautiyangu are lobbies. And if Fazul understood the intricacies of the civil society, the workings of civil society or lobbies, people are allowed to create a basket fund where you say several organizations, the shared idea, you contribute money for ease of management instead of money flowing from separate individual accounts, organizational accounts, and then funding activities that are shared. It's usually common practice. Even donors, they usually create a basket fund where people contribute funds to a particular cause, and then now that fund is for ease of management, and there's nothing unlawful or unconstitutional about it. And there is nothing for declaration. I mean, the account is there. You can track where that money has come from. If the money is going to Kurayangu, Sautiyangu, it must have flown from a certain account, whether it's coming from Kenya Human Rights Commission. Yes, it should be traceable. So the idea that for the reason that Kurayangu, Sautiyangu, or we the people have opened an account is not in itself unlawful and does not necessarily make Fazul oversight that. That's a lobby. It has not been registered. The parent organization are already registered and are functioning or operating within the law. If I have a salary, Mr. Gitonga, and I contribute my salary to your wedding committee, do I need to tell Fazul that now there's a wedding committee, Gitonga marries so-and-so committee? If you open a particular account for that, you should trace where the source has come from, where the source of that money. So I think in terms of understanding the intricacies of management of funds under the civil society for a shared purpose, I think he's missed a step there. But most importantly, in the context of this election, I think there's been some deliberate attempt to decampaign or delegitimize the voice of the civil society. And I say to those people who are involved in such that they don't understand the technique of governance. A robust, critical, and independent civil society is our own irreducible minimum in terms of improving the technique of governance.
So having said all that, Steve, does that then reduce this to a political game?
It is a political game, but until evidence is tendered to show that Fazul is actually doing this on behalf of the benefit of Uhuru and Ruto, I think I would not want to pontificate and extend it to that level, because Fazul is required to make decisions independently. And also, as the executive director, if he should be able to take responsibility without having to pass the buck. The constitutionality and the legality of his office has always been cast in doubt. 3 judges have actually found that Fazul is not fit to hold that office. And in fact, that the NGO Act, under which he continues to operate, is indeed unconstitutional, because there was the Public Benefit Organizations Act, passed and assented to by President Kibaki in 2013. Now, you can't have 2 legal regimes managing the sector. The newer law usually overrides the older law. So the older law in which Fazul is operating, actually the legality of that law has been successfully challenged, but he continues to operate in that office with impunity, and he continues to seek protection until and after Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto comes out direct to say that, yes, we are giving instructions to Fazul. I think we should not overestimate Fazul's actions and try to relate them to the executive. Fazul must just take responsibility as a reckless, careless individual who is only fit for sacking.
All right. Wow. Very strong statements there. It's now 24 minutes after 7. Let's now cross over to Kamande, who is in our city center studio. Do you agree that Fazul is possibly acting recklessly, as mentioned by Steve here, and possibly the only thing that he possibly deserves is to be fired?
I actually strongly disagree with Steve Ogola's sentiment. Is that Fazul's mandate is that it's provided for in the law, and since his office was challenged, nobody else has ever moved to ensure that the office is vacated. So until that is the position, then Fazul is in office legally, and then he has, and it is upon him to pursue his mandate. But at the same time, let us look at this thing objectively. If indeed we as Kenyans want to be governed under the rule of law, then even the bodies themselves which feel they are fighting for the rule of law should also be governed by the same rule of law. And what do I mean by that? Is that it is upon those non-governmental organizations and NGOs to follow the law. They cannot at one point accuse the government of not following the law, and then at the same time, they themselves are trying the best that they can to go behind the same law that governs them. To that, I will also go back to what Steve was talking about in terms of a bucket contribution of these NGOs. For example, you have Kura Yangu, Sauti Yangu, and We the People. If you look at all that, you have not all the organizations in those lobbies are NGOs. You look at KMPDU is not an NGO. You look at UASU, it's not an NGO. You look at CORT, it is not an NGO. Then how do you even account for that money from those organizations? So what is happening is simple, is that these organizations are trying to take advantage of the political period to show that they are being persecuted. That is what I would say, and for them to go behind and not follow the law.
All right, Steve, you seem to disagree totally with
I think sometimes as lawyers, we tend to overanalyze things. Let me put this thing in a very simple, plain language. There is no law, Gitonga, that requires you, that limits your opportunity to do good. There's only law, the law that is there should prohibit you from harming another person. If I want to do good, there are inexhaustible opportunities to do good. I can walk out of this station and give money wherever I want to. You see? But if you think that the money I'm giving to whatever charitable cause is let's say, black money or illegal money, then all you need to do is to trace where the money has come from. I read the statement by Fazul. It isolates two critical issues. The first issue that Fazul isolates is this. He says that Kura Yangu, Sauti Yangu, and We the People are not registered, and therefore should not do charitable work. I, as an individual citizen, I don't need to be registered by anyone or my organization or a lobby to do charitable work.
He mentions charitable work, but also get involved in political activity.
Now, political activity is an inextricable component of the civil society, and they don't need to apologize for that.
But are there rules and regulations to which they're supposed to abide by?
The point is this. Nobody needs authorization to comment or participate in the political life of this country. That is just as simple as that. Number one, that's number one. Number two, the issue of finances is a question that Fazul could say, let us trace the money that We the People is using. From which account has it flown from? If you have 5 organizations, or maybe 10 lobbies, but only 3 have the financial capacity to contribute to a particular cause, the problem is not that because they have opened an account with money. You trace where the money that We the People is using, the money that Kura Yangu, Sauti Yangu is using, where has it come from? You can trace it back. From which account? Because the money must have moved from one account to that account. You get? So opening account, personally, I run a foundation. I have opened an account. The money is in that account. If you want to know the source of that, you trace it back. From which account did money flow to that account? And banks can give you this information. Number two, the question of political activation for these lobbies and maybe supporting political opposition. I have said people who understand the order and practice of governance. The role of the political opposition and the civil society, sometimes there's a confluence, and they don't need to apologize about that. The role of the political opposition is to oversight government. The role of the civil society is to provide that platform or a soundboard for people's ideas and also to check government. If they have a shared objective and they work together, in fact, I saw John Gidongo attempting to apologize, telling Kenyans that the civil society is not working in the position. He doesn't need to give that kind of explanation. If they work together, if they have a shared idea, so be it, because the Constitution allows it. But even if assuming that there was something sinister, what Fazul is required by law to do is this: to write formally, and not through the media, to write formally to these organizations, raising issues to give them opportunity to also respond in writing. If there's need for further clarification, then to invite them to peruse and maybe to consult on documents presented. But I think Fazul, why I'm faulting him is this: he has missed a critical step. By the time he's rushing the media, trying to delegitimize the voices of these organizations at a time when they are preparing to file an election petition, he's unnecessarily drawing Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto into a fight that doesn't belong to them and a fight that they can do without. What Fazul ought to have done is this: he ought to have asked, where is this account that where is this account, in which bank is this account for Kurayangu?
I think they're stated. It's actually
once he has stated that, he'd have written to that bank to say, help us, we are trying to investigate, help us trace the money that is deposited in this account. Was it deposited, over the counter? So that in which case now...
In short, you'd be trying to trace where the money has come from.
First of all, he should do the back-end processes first, exhaustively, and then tell Kurayangu Sautiangu that we have realized that the money you've deposited from your own account, Kenya Human Rights Commission account, for instance, where Judge Kegore is the boss, to Kurayangu Sautiangu is unaccounted for because you never disclosed it. So you have more than what is disclosed in your account, and then you have illegally transferred some of that money to this account so that you deal with the finances, not with the functions of that organization.
All right. And, I don't know if Kamande has anything to add on to that, but allow me to also move the conversation as we continue, because there are several things I'd like us to tackle this morning on the political point. And, Kamande, you wanted to say something that briefly, I'd like us to move on to the petitions now.
Yes. Just 2 minutes. Ogola is a lawyer, and he has alluded to the Public Benefit Organizations Act and the NGO Coordination Act. And the question I'm going to ask him, and he needs to explain, where is there a need for registration of those public benefit organizations or the civil society organizations, if indeed anybody or any lobby can come together and pool resources together and undertake functions for which they fall squarely within the Act. It is important, and it is for order that these organizations are registered. You cannot just downplay such an important role in this country and say that anybody can coalesce or they can come together as a group and start an organization and nobody will care where those funds are coming from. It's not just about funds. It's also about regulation. It's about accountability. So in essence, what we are saying is, there is no way an organization can operate if it is not registered and its functions fall squarely under the Act. The question then we should ask ourselves is, if indeed there is no need for registration, why is Muhuri registered? Why is Kenya Human Rights Commission registered? Why is ICJ Kenya registered? Why are all those organizations that are supplying and are funding these organizations registered themselves? Therefore, and in the same breath, you look at, and I do not want to go beyond that, if you look at the petitions that were filed today, it is by chairmen of certain organizations. Why didn't they themselves, for example, file those petitions in the lobby groups? Because essentially that registration is important and it is grounded in law.
All right.
And therefore it is wrong for Steve to downplay the importance of that registration.
Okay. Your comments before we take a break and then we move on from that.
Let me just make it brief. Registration is actually to the benefit of that organization. If you want to have formal structures, the law says, and let me tell you, Gitonga, I have a detailed understanding of the working of the society because I worked there for 6 years before I moved to private practice.
Yes, and the question that he's asking is why downplay the registration?
No, I'm not downplaying anything. What I'm saying is this. Registration and regulation is actually for the benefit of those organizations that want to operate in that space. Because if you want to create formal structures, you want to hire staff, now you are creating an opportunity where you can now enter the realm of regulation. You want to open offices, physical offices. The law says if you want to open, even for lawyers, I have a private practice. For me to run a private practice, the law statute of Kenya requires for me to state where are my physical offices. I can't say, even if they're in my house, I must say that they're in my house. I must give that. But if I want to provide legal services without the need of opening physical offices, then LSK need not to know the law statute of Kenya. But
then you'd be operating illegally because where is the accountability? How does somebody trace you if you disagree?
Gitonga, I don't know why you're stretching this thing beyond what common sense requires. This is the issue. Regulation, registration and regulation is to the benefit of those individual organizations because they want to have formal structures, correct? There is a law that provides for that. That is the Public Benefits Organizations Act, which I was very much involved in this formulation and review. Secondly, the issue of charitable work, generally. If you do charitable work at a personal level or for short-term purposes, you don't need to register it. You can come, Kenyans create lobbies all the time. In fact, even corporates, including Standard Media Group, usually once in a while they do what they're calling corporate social responsibility, which is basically social work. Which is basically charitable work. You don't need every time to do charitable work. If I step out of this studio and I meet a needy person there and say, here is bus fare to town, I don't need, so that's the simplicity of this issue.
All right, I'll have to
if I want to run a formal organization, then I will be brought in within the realm of the law and the regulation.
All right, I'll cut you short there, and that's because we need to take a short break. But do stay with us right here on KTN News. This is The Political Point. We'll be right back with more items that we'd like to get a deeper understanding about.